Okay, morning. It is, I guess, week 2 now, if we made it that far. The last class was about behavior as a cultural value and how it affects etiquette in particular. And I'm going to start this class with a small part about negotiation, cross-cultural negotiation, which also requires some understanding and behavioral elements. And then I'm going to shift to the understanding of different cultures through the Hofstede model, which is more macro-oriented, not so much about behavior, but more about the thinking of the people from different cultures and how it affects what their management style they will accept, as well as their expectations when they go into some situation. Those are pretty hardwired. Cross-cultural negotiation is the interaction, typically in business, that occurs between various cultures. These negotiations are typically viewed as occurring between various nations, but cross-cultural studies can also occur between different cultures within the same nation, which obviously, I come from a multinational country, so there's a lot of misunderstanding of people a lot of times. Sometimes the misunderstanding is by choice. It's easy to pretend that you don't understand somebody if it's convenient. So I'm going to start with this overall video and then go into it a bit more.
Different ways. An older gentleman might negotiate one way, while different people negotiate different ways. An older gentleman might negotiate one way, while a single mother of 3 might negotiate the other way. These differences are not only present here in the U.S., but also when we negotiate with individuals from other countries. Culture influences how individuals negotiate and how they view or interpret the negotiation process. If we understand that negotiations are conversations aimed at reaching an agreement, and if we can also understand that different cultures reach agreements in different ways, then we have the basis of international negotiations. That is to say, how one culture may look at the negotiation process totally different than another. These differences can create conflict in the process. There are several main areas where cultural differences impact negotiating. The following are all differences that may arise during the negotiation process due to cultural differences. Desire for a long-term relationship or just a one-time deal. Preference to win negotiating or preference for a win-win negotiating. Informal or formal attitude. Direct or indirect communication style. Show emotion or hide emotions. Decisions made by the group or by the leader. Let's look at each of these points to get a better idea of how they can affect negotiation. First, we can discuss whether the negotiating party is looking for just a one-shot type of business or long-term relationship.
So that's the kind of thing that also affects customer service, right? So if you have a tourist economy, customers that come to Famulao or come to Nha Trang for one time only, you can see that the service level gets worse and worse because no one has to worry about customer loyalty. Maybe there's some negative word of mouth, but for the most part, they don't have to worry about that. So how you treat a relationship, if you're taking care of it in a long-term way, is going to be different from if it's a one-time situation. You're going to think about it in terms of you're not going to try to win right away. Okay, so that's one thing.
While some markets might be looking for just a contract, Spain for example, members of other countries might be looking for a long-term relationship, India for example. Next, we have the win-win thought process of negotiations. Some cultures look at negotiating as a win-win type of process, as the Japanese do, but countries like Spain typically do not view the negotiation that way. They prefer to win the negotiation and are not as concerned with the win-win proposition. Personal style also plays a cultural part in negotiations. Specifically, is a person more formal, professional, detailed, structured, and businesslike?
You can imagine the judgments that come from that, right? So it's most often the formal people who dictate to the informal countries what is right and wrong. And it's rarely that a formal dressed person would dress informally to make you feel better if you're informal.
Or informal, more personable, wanting to connect with the other party when it comes to negotiating. As it relates to negotiating, the Germans are more formal where individuals from Mexico are more informal. This formality helps guide how these two different cultures negotiate and in turn how you should negotiate with them. Tied somewhat to the aspects of formal or informal culture is the aspect of whether individuals in the culture communicate directly or indirectly. An example of this is in negotiations, yes does not mean yes with the Japanese. Yes means I understand, and is very indirect means of communicating. On the other hand, the Israelis believe in very direct communication, which can sometimes feel off-putting to those who do not understand this cultural difference. There are many other aspects that can affect negotiations, such as if individuals in the culture typically hide how they're feeling, like the Japanese, or do they show their feelings right away, like much of the Latin culture. There's always the concept of how group decision-making is handled. Do they make a decision as a group, or does one person in the group make the decision? Many Asian cultures stress team consensus before a decision can be made, and typically in the US, we're looking for the group leader to make the decision.
Consensus, that means that the team has to agree together. So there has to be some kind of process for that. That seems like more of a management style than it seems like actual, like not a management style of employees, but within the management the organization itself, they're usually top down, not the employees.
All the aspects that were just explained influence how negotiations are going to take place. Each country, unless they are well educated in the negotiation position of other countries, will enter a negotiation from the perspective of what they are most comfortable with, mainly how they negotiate in their home country. Do we not, as Americans, enter into negotiations thinking how everyone in the negotiation should act? As we have seen here, that is not the case, and different cultures will negotiate in different ways, or we could say, from different perspectives. And unless a person understands these cultural nuances, they can perceive these nuances as being rude, time-wasting, or even disrespectful. Negotiating is an art no matter what country you're in. Weaving your way through a negotiation so you can obtain what you want or need is a skill unto itself. Thus, it makes sense that understanding cultural aspects of negotiating can make you a stronger negotiator. As the world gets smaller and the organizations become more diverse, it is not just the international traveler that has to be aware of these cultural issues. Indeed, for anyone to be truly skilled negotiator, they have to know the person they are negotiating with, which includes the cultural aspect. Remember, when dealing with culture and negotiations and potential conflict, there are several main areas that are present. Desire for a long-term relationship.
These are worth note-taking.
Or just a one-time deal. Preference to win negotiating or preference for a win-win situation. Informal or formal attitude. Direct or indirect communication style. Show emotion or hide emotions. And finally, decisions made by the group or by a leader.
Yeah, negotiating is a pretty fun game. I know when I go to the market, I mean, obviously, if I want to buy some fabric or some material to take to a tailor, immediately of course, I stand out like a foreigner, so they're already thinking like, okay, how can I get the maximum money from him? Usually, an American in a buying decision hates to have no price. Like I hate shops that don't put the prices on things. I feel like they just make up a number when they get to the when they get to the checkout. They just make up any number that they want. Really don't. If I go into any kind of mini mart and there's no prices, I don't want to shop there at all. But in the market situation, it's kind of fun. I think the fun part about it is that no one has monopoly power, right? So if you needed to buy a special part for your Apple product or whatever gaming system, and there's only one seller, that's a monopoly position. And as a customer, you really can't. You can try, but at the end, you're weaker in that negotiation. You're gonna have to accept whatever level of price that, if you really want it, that they're gonna offer. But when you go to the market, there's a bunch of sellers, right? You have, it's like, maybe there's one special type of fabric that you want for that suit, so you have, it's a monopoly because they have it, but they don't know they have a monopoly. So you try to keep the information to yourself, and you try to keep your emotions a little bit tighter to your, you don't show that you're excited about it. You kind of look like, it's okay, maybe this is what I'm looking for. But inside, you're like, yes, that's it, that's the one. And you won't show that emotion, or else you're gonna put yourself in a weaker negotiating position. So a normal strategy or price negotiation would be when you, as the buyer, ask the seller how much is the price, and they'll say 100, and you'll go, oh wow, 100, that's incredibly high in my mind. I can't, it's really much more than I thought. I was thinking it was gonna be 50. And they look at you like, oh my God, how could you think that I could survive in this cruel world charging 50 for this? There's no way I can sell that at 50 and still be able to take care of my family. 80 or 85, maybe 90. And you think, oh, 90, wow, that's still just, I can't afford it. My wife, she won't allow me to spend, this is me, but if I'm American, I don't say this, but since I'm living here, I can adopt some Vietnamese negotiating strategies and say, well, my wife told me I cannot pay more than 70 for this, and then if it works out, you find a price somewhere between 70 and 80. But you can use other strategies, of course. If you feel like you have the power as the customer, you can try to walk away, negotiation technique. Just go, oh, no way, I can't afford that, and walk away. And then they call you, hey, you, and then you get a better price. Sometimes I will use economies of scale strategy. I call it economies of scale strategy. So I say to them, okay, this looks nice. This marker looks good. What if I buy like 10 of them or 20 of them, how much is the price going to be for one? So before, they said, oh, it'll be 10,000 for one. I'm like, okay, So if I buy 20 of these, how much is one? They're like, oh, okay, then it's 6,000. Because I'm gonna buy 20. And I think, oh, okay, this is great. I'll give you 6,000 for one, and if I like it, I'll come back and I'll buy 20 more. They hate that, right? They hate that. But you figured out, you use the strategy of bulk selling to find out what's the lowest price they can go and still make a profit. So that's kind of fun. But and then they get mad. Usually sometimes they don't sell it to me at that price still, but I said, oh, come on, you said it could be this price. So, yeah, when you travel in the world, you'll see that there's a lot of negotiation out there. Excuse me, just woke up. Okay, so some people like it, some people really don't like it, and they just want everything to be fixed prices. Usually in the US, we're not very good at negotiating for small things. We don't really practice a lot. So I imagine that if you have some, like my wife probably is a better negotiator in a market than I am, and probably understands the basics of negotiation for even bigger things, like a house, house buying. But in the US, the only time that we really do negotiations is when we buy something big, like a car or like a house. Because the numbers are so big, we know that there's extra profit in there that can come out of the total. So let's look at some differences between cultural differences between two countries. Well, before I go there, let me just do one more thing here. Is it gonna work? I don't know. 38, 37. I don't want to go that way. I want to go this way. Can't go to number 2. It's so weird. It's so weird. So the only way to get to page number 3, what's happening to it? The only way to get to number 3 is to go to backwards all the way. It's unbelievable. So this is pretty good. I don't expect you to remember all of this at all. Wait, oh, now it's on this thing. Come on, man. So, why is it doing this? Okay, so you have the process and the outcomes, and then you have these other things around the process, which are who's pressuring. So you have the cultural differences of the stakeholders, like I was talking about with monopolies. You have the bargaining power of each party and how dependent they are on the transaction. So do they need this so bad that they cannot walk away? Is there any past conflicts? What was the relationship before the negotiation? Did they know each other before? Do they agree on the outcome of this? Do they both? Is it possible to both win in this situation? And then you have the external environment. You have the laws and the government, maybe some foreign exchange problems that might, like agreeing on the price might be affected by changes in exchange rates. Political pluralism. So if one government makes an agreement with another government, does the next government in that country also follow the agreements of the government before? Donald Trump took a lot of Obama's laws and agreements and just threw them away right away. So if you're in a negotiation with the United States, can you really trust them and depend on the future of the agreement, or is it only temporary until the next government takes over? So that's tricky. Does the law change a lot? Is there a lot of, maybe there's even religious law, can be very complicated. And that could be in the cultural differences too. So this is really good for thinking about there's a lot of external factors in the process of cross-cultural negotiation.
If you are an education providers, you don't need a huge budget, you don't need a lot of time, and you don't need a big branding in order to.
Also, you can really imagine how this is going to affect advertising. Very big differences in communication. Subtle communication. The values of the people involved are the ones that you can see that I cannot see. In your culture, you have a kind of code and understanding of the messages, the psychological messages of an advertisement. I might not see that. It might look completely different to me. All right, here's a business negotiation between America and Japan and some of the issues that come up. Figured out that he shouldn't have put that business card quickly in his butt pocket, and then she tried to do her cultural move and look at the card and read the manager and say, oh, very good, very interesting. And then she's like, well, I can't hold it in my hand. I'll try to be like him. I'll put it in my pocket too. So she tried to accommodate him there, but he didn't really understand that it was totally wrong what he did with those business cards. who goes first. Everybody has to pretend they're not really want to go first. And then the American is quick to explain why this is going to be a benefit. So consensus, have to talk about it for a long period of time. You won't understand what they're talking about at all. Actually, I think this is, in that sense, Vietnamese consensus is quite similar. And now this guy's saying basically like, so, do we have a deal? Pretty funny. She's probably saying yes, but inside her head she feels like no. That's what that means. She's like, yeah, sure.
Hello, sir. Hello. How's it going, Ben? I'm sure 100% that we'll be working with happiness. Okay, good job. See you in New York. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Waiting. Oh, thank you for your proposal. It's rejected.
I bet you're now questioning why this is happening. So do you want to know the answer? All of you. So you know that Africa and Japan have.
What is she doing, man?
So you're seeing the video, right? Africa and Japan.
How can they do this? What is going on with the echo?
Will give their business card with
Wow, that was crazy. Alright, these people don't know how to produce something. The first part, the sound was okay, and now it's like echo mania. So, bad greeting style, they didn't bow, too much handshake. Problem number 2 was the business card.
their business card with both of their hand, and they will receive the gift with both of their hands, and they will examine first.
I really will never feel bad about my sound quality again. It's amazing. Third problem, starting the meeting.
Trying to have a small chit chat with the American, but the American wants to really do the presentation, so it's no-no, because Japanese want to have a small chit.
So they need to not go right into the negotiation. Mistake 4, body gesture. I'm not sure which one she's talking about.
They understand you or maybe yes, so we can move on.
Oh, that's just yes and no. And yeah, I don't know. It could not great. The ending, why? Okay, so the last part I'm going to put into this video today, it's not a very long one, is to go into page 90, maybe 96 and 97 real quick. 2 of the worst pages in this textbook, really unbelievable, but almost funny, but not quite funny. So in this context, religion can definitely have an effect on, usually a strong religion is very clear and obvious. It's not like it's a surprise. You're like, if you land in Saudi Arabia, you know it's different. There's a huge instant feeling of difference if you're a Western person. Some countries you maybe don't feel that for a while. But religion usually stands out pretty strong. Also, I think that when we have a diverse society, we're used to dealing with people from different cultures. And we can also expect that the people who are from other cultures, whether they agree or not, at least understand why we do what we do. So, you know, if you're doing negotiations in London or New York, those cities are so diverse, you don't really, it's hard to shock people. People have seen pretty much everything. It's usually not going to be a big factor in negotiations so much. But when you go to another country and you feel that immediate difference, that's when you have to study and kind of learn about the cultures of other people. All right, terrible, page 96, so bad. Religious beliefs, that's what this is about, are part of the foundation of a country's culture and values. The way people interact, their lifestyles in terms of marketing, sales, and spending patterns. Spending patterns, holidays, you know, for example. Marketing is also, you know, Tet is a huge advertising expenditure time of year. Religious beliefs may have a minimal amount of impact on business in some countries which are multicultural, but in Muslim countries it's a big difference. Muslim countries are probably the biggest different, or at least the most radically different from Western. They originally didn't, you know, accept when people give credit, you know, or give, you know, loans to people who buy. Borrowing money was considered not ethical in that culture. Even if you lend someone money, you shouldn't take interest payments for that, right? You shouldn't exploit the money that you have to take rents of interest from others. So, also false claims, they have kind of a consumer protection built into their system. If you know, you really have a right to come back and complain if something is, and under their religious law, if you do complain, then the transaction is canceled. Also, in a lot of places, if you give compliments to things that people have, they have to give them to you, so you have to be a little bit careful, and it's embarrassing. So be careful about your compliments. This page is just so very general and ridiculous. Then they had Buddhist business ethics, which I never heard of before. The Buddhist Business Code. Wouldn't that be a cool name for a band? The Buddhist Business Code, never heard of it. And professional ethics are closely tied with the respect of the environment. So, yeah, so, you know, we're not supposed to kill any animals. We're supposed to, I don't think you're going to be doing, here's a good example in the book, funny example actually, selling weapons, selling arms, that's kind of a funny idea. But I mean, let's not pretend that Buddhists are completely pacifistic or non-violent, but who cares? It's a negotiation. Why are we going to talk about selling weapons? Christian business ethics. Yikes. If you, just like anything else in Christianity, if you read it, it sounds good and people don't really follow it. The Christian in commerce should not desire to get another's goods or labor for less than it's worth. So fair value. One must not try to obtain a good price, a too high price. If one is buying from poor people, don't kill them in a negotiation. Charity must be exercised as well as justice. Try to pay a fair price. Feel for the people who you pay who may not have as much as you. So don't negotiate poor people down to a low level. I see people do that and I think, wow, that's a little bit, don't push so hard. Maybe that's one of my values, I don't know. Moreover, the purchaser shouldn't allow the suffering of the seller because he cannot stand firm for his price. That's the same. I don't know. Then it says Jewish business ethics. Nobody knows about that. Then they try to talk about indigenous business ethics, like the Australian Aboriginal culture. I didn't know they had a separate ethics. Indigenous enterprises often have to operate within an environment of complex social and cultural obligations. Indigenous business people have a desire to positively reflect indigenous values. Basically, there's nothing in this paragraph that's helping us to understand how we could work with them, manage them, negotiate with them, or try to hire them. It's an awful section of the book. I'm on page 97, and I'll make a note here on ethics. When operating in different nations, companies will encounter different values, beliefs, and ethical standards. A company may work to spread their corporate culture and ethics to wherever they operate. This is an ethical dilemma. An ethical dilemma, in this case, we're talking about outsourcing to countries that don't have strong labor standards. So this creates an ethical dilemma. Is it ethical to take advantage of the poor working conditions of a country just to increase your profit? Or should we ask these companies to comply with the higher standards from a country that's outsourcing? Most countries don't really have an ethical problem with that, unfortunately. But it is an issue. Second ethical issue here is, I'm just going through this quick because it's not really, it's a little bit about values, but it's mostly about people wanting to exploit. The people who are from the outsourcing company are also exploiting the labor. Bribery. I think we've talked about this a couple times. And this is the first time they actually say that there's a difference in our book on page 97. They describe bribery as two kinds. Bribery involves payments offered to government officials to gain an advantage, which I totally agree is non-competitive and is something that probably should be in a fair business competitive setting, should not be allowed. But then there's something called lubrication. Lubrication involves a relatively small amount of cash, a little tea money or a gift. And this is something that's not really to gain an advantage, but it's just to get something achieved in the bureaucracy of the country. And if you're new to a country and you don't realize that they have this system, it can be complicated for you. Some people try to fight and say, I will never pay a bribe. Well, good luck. Good luck trying to achieve something in Southeast Asia, anywhere. Because that's the system. That's the system that we're in. Okay, thank you for your patience in this negotiation video.